dear. Where's your magic sword?
I, Arthur, was to carry Excalibur. That is why I'm your king.
Arthur's real enough and man enough to ride as we do in pursuit of glory.
Merlin? But this Merlin is no wizard.
He's a worthless drunkard.
I should have known better than to trust a Frenchman.
The robot is feeding off the magic of Excalibur.
But your priests deny the power of Avalon.
A dream to some.
A nightmare to others!
Hello and welcome to Hollywood Avalon with your hosts Mary Jones
and Dennis Ling.
And we are recording this on what might be a broken laptop because some of the keys are not working after I spilled a seltzer on it on Christmas Eve.
Put some rice on it.
You know what? This is the kitty litter on your ice cream end of a year. Look, it has been a year. Look, nobody's happy this year. Everybody's unhappy, right?
Yeah.
Everything sucks. You know, it's been a hard year for both of us in different ways. And look, we have it easy. We have easy lives compared to a lot of people.
Right.
Right. But, you know, we've also been miserable. So I decided that I was going to give us a little bit of a treat.
What's that?
Well, I decided that for this month's episode, we were going to watch Excalibur.
Yay.
Finally. Yes, I know. Look, there are certain films.
To be honest, I feel like we just started Hollywood Avalon.
It's been 2 years. It's been 2 years, Dennis. This is episode 20.
This feels so early to me.
It's episode 20. This is not early. If anything, we've been edging this whole time. You know, I've held off on doing like some of the big movies, which is this and Monty Python and the Holy Grail.
So when's the last time you saw this?
Oh my God, it's been a long time.
Yeah, I don't think we've ever watched it together.
We've never watched it together. Like I've seen like scenes. Yeah. No. So it's got to be at least 20 years since I've seen it. Nonetheless, I remember a lot about this film.
Mm-hmm.
It's a striking film. It's, you know, John Boorman made it because he couldn't make Lord of the Rings. So
and
he's just
a crazy cast.
Oh my God, it really
everybody you'd want.
It really is an incredible cast. So
except for
what? I
feel like that. What's his name? Big booming voice.
Oh, Brian Blessed?
Yeah. He should have been in there somewhere. Come on.
Yeah, I mean, Brian Blessed would have been fun in here somewhere. But otherwise, yes, you have such a stacked cast. I mean, yes, Nigel Terry plays King Arthur, and Nichol Williamson plays Merlin, and they're great. And, of course, you know, you have Helen Mirren as Morgana, who's amazing.
Nichol
Williamson.
Nichol Williamson. Is he in anything else?
He was more of a stage actor, I think.
Because, like, of everyone, he completely dominates.
Oh, he's amazing in this. He is both fully what you want Merlin to be. He's also funny in weird ways.
Yeah.
He is a perfect Merlin, possibly the best Merlin ever on screen. But the thing
when we say Merlin, we mean, you know, also Obi-Wan Kenobi, also, you know, Gandalf.
Yeah,
this originates that, and he tops them all. I think
he really does.
The Doctor.
Yes, no, they are all variations of Merlin, and he really is like maybe the best incarnation of Merlin I've ever seen in a film.
Yeah.
No offense to Stanley Tucci in Transformers: The First Night.
Yes, no offense.
No offense. I actually kind of do like Stanley Tucci in that role. He's fun, but that's not a good movie at all. But there are things in it that I'm like, that's not so bad.
No. And compared to other stuff we've watched, I mean, at least it's interesting.
At least it's interesting to pull apart.
Yeah.
Yeah. But so this...
It's not boring like First Night.
Oh, God, I hate First Night. Or King Arthur, the 2006 film that I absolutely love.
It's way better than both those.
Oh, my God. But anyway, we're talking about Excalibur, John Boorman's incredible epic. This came out in 1981. What year did Conan the Barbarian come out?
I think the same year. What a year.
But that's the thing. They both kind of set the template for sword and sorcery in the 80s.
Yeah.
Now, that was already in the air, obviously. Look, a lot of stuff goes back to Tolkien publishing Lord of the Rings, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that is kind of the moment that a lot of culture takes on that fantasy element. It's not that stuff didn't exist before Tolkien, obviously, and Tolkien is just like, I'm just working with stuff that was already around. I mean, you have like William Morris translating Norse sagas in the late Victorian era. You have
Conan the Barbarian.
You have Conan the Barbarian by E. Howard whatever Richard E. I don't remember his name, but point is, so you have like Conan the Barbarian books, you have Lord Dunsany's like fairy tales and stuff, like not fairy stories, not fairy tales, whatever. The point is, so you have like kind of early fantasy in the Victorian into the early, you have, Sir Walter Scott writing Ivanhoe, and that's like reusing medieval stuff. So you have, stuff, right? Mm-hmm. And King Arthur and those stories, like that all is a big part of that, especially with the Victorians in England and whatnot, and in the United States. These things cycle in and out. And in the middle of the 20th century, you've got, Tolkien, and partially, this is just the thing he likes, but also partially he is dealing with his own issues, having gone through the First World War and, being upset about the Second World War. And he writes Lord of the Rings. And Lord of the Rings really just ignites everybody's brains. I mean, it really just kind of sets something off where people are just like, oh my God, this is like a fantasy world, but at the same time, it's evoking things that people kind of remember. So, people wanted to do a film version of Lord of the Rings, including the Beatles, we've brought up in another episode. They wanted to be, parts of the Fellowship, or in John Lennon's case, he wants to be Gollum, which, yeah, that fits.
And that was with John Boorman.
That was maybe.
Okay.
I don't know if that was actually like they were going to make it with him or not. He wanted to do it. I know they wanted to do it. I don't know if that was the same film. But so John Boorman, he wanted to make Lord of the Rings, and he couldn't get the rights. I don't know how Rankin Bass was able to get away with it. So what did Boorman do? He turns around and says, well, if I can't do that, I'm going to make, my King Arthur epic. And there have been other King Arthur epics, as we already know. We've already gone through, like Knights of the Round Table and Camelot. And, it was just something that was part of the same zeitgeist as people's interest in Lord of the Rings, right? But what Boorman does, he takes all of that stuff, right? And all of the interest in fantasy, and then he marries that with his own readings of those sorts of weird takes on the Holy Grail story by Jessie Weston with From Ritual to Romance, and what he knows about...
What is From Ritual to Romance?
God damn it, we've discussed this.
I know. I've forgotten.
Okay. So the Golden Bough, right? Yeah. The Golden Bough by J.G. Fraser is sort of a landmark early book on anthropology that, yes, it gets a lot of stuff kind of wrong, and it's Victorian, it's speculative, but it comes up with these ideas of how you can find religious meanings in old rituals or old texts, and it's like all about pagan stuff, about dying gods who are then they're killed and then raised from the dead, and it's about regenerating the land, and it's about fertility of the soil and all that type of stuff. And it was incredibly popular in the Victorian period, the late Victorian into the early modern, and a lot of that has to do with as a backlash against industrialization and what people saw as like the despoiling of the land, and which is a theme that you can go all the way back to the first Industrial Revolution and William Blake's poem Jerusalem, all the way up through T.S. Eliot's The Wasteland, right? So the Golden Bough lands right smack in the middle of that, and it's incredibly influential in how people would read, say, classical texts, medieval texts, whatnot. Jessie Weston, she was an early anthropologist, and she picked it up and applied it to the Holy Grail story. Right, and that's where you get this idea of like the Fisher King as this, maimed god, Percival, revitalizing him, and it's like connected to the land and all of that type of stuff. And of course, then T.S. Eliot runs with that as his, kind of meditation on World War I and the post-World War world that he was looking at in the 1920s. Okay, John Boorman does the same thing. So he's reading those books, and he applies it to Thomas Malory's 15th century early novel, late romance, whatever you want to call it, the Morte Darthur. And he melds what is part of the zeitgeist of the reading of the Grail text and Arthurian stories from, looking at stuff like Jessie Weston's book From Ritual to Romance. And he marries that to the Morte Darthur, and then basically like there's an overlay of that kind of 60s counterculture, the growth of like English folk rock, which is very different from American folk rock because it's like repurposing old ballads and folk horror and the Wicker Man and like that kind of there are these weird old stories that we're pulling up from Gothic texts and things like that. And so Boorman is like kind of smashing that all together and putting it in plate armor, and and making his version
very shiny plate armor.
But it's perfect. Look, this is so what I want a representation of Arthurian romance to look like,
It's very much like contemporary paintings of knights and things like that you'd see like the Pre-Raphaelites do.
Yeah.
Where they're not trying to make it look like the 500s.
Yeah.
Like they're not trying to like capture it. And it's the same way with like Northern Renaissance trying to, painting paintings of Jesus, and they're just painting people from like the 1500s.
Yeah.
And like dressed up as like the bourgeoisie or whatever.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. And he is, instead of say putting King Arthur in a business suit, he is putting him firmly in the late Middle Ages with plate armor, because that's when the books were being written, right? Mm-hmm. That's when you had the Morte Darthur being written.
And it's the drawings that if you did get books on that stuff, that's what you would see.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, we're not going into this looking for a historical epic about the 5th century in Britain or the 6th century. We're not looking for what if, Arthur was actually a Roman general. Like, no, mm-hmm. That's not what this is. This is fantasy. This is kind of like a perfect late 20th century take on King Arthur. Everything else comes from this.
This feels like this is what movies from like 1990 on have been fighting against.
Yeah, I think so. Once the 90s hit, and it's got to be like, well, this has to, no, we have to make this more historical. We have to make this more gritty. We have to make this whatever. Everything has been striving against this.
Boring.
Honestly, yeah. Like, I am curious as to what the Guy Ritchie version of this is, mm-hmm. because, honestly, I don't even dislike Guy Ritchie films necessarily. I kind of like that first Sherlock. Mm-hmm. I might actually like his King Arthur movie. But yeah, everything does feel like it's struggling against this in different ways.
You know who I'd love to see make a King Arthur movie with like a big budget and stuff? David Eggers.
Oh my God. I might explode. No, here's the thing. David Eggers, I'm sure, loves this movie.
Yeah.
Because even though this is not historical, Eggers' films are all like striving with a certain level of historical accuracy insofar as he is trying to get into the mindset of the people set in the times that he's making. At the same time, he embraces what their minds would think was happening, so that when you watch The Northman, when he dies, he goes to Valhalla, and you see that on screen, and it is not treated as a fantasy. It is treated as this is what happens to him. Yeah. It's the same thing in The Witch. When she goes and accepts, Black Peter's offer, she becomes a witch. Oh my God. So, what? We went and watched David Lowery's The Green Knight, and I have a lot of problems with The Green Knight. Mm-hmm. It's a great looking film. Dev Patel's fantastic in it. I have a lot of issues with the ending of that film. I think Eggers would completely understand how to make an Arthurian film if he wanted to.
Yeah.
And I think he would probably, would he embrace plate armor? I don't know. Would it look exactly the same? Maybe not, but I think he would at least get the spirit right.
Yeah.
This movie is bonkers, right? From what I remember. Because, like I said, it's been at least 20 years since I've seen it. It's a bonkers film. It is operatic. It literally uses opera or classical music. That's the thing. You have to embrace this film as a whole bunch of stuff stuck together in a very 20th century way. And at the same time, it's authentic for what it is. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I fully think Boorman intends everything that you're seeing on screen to hit you the way that it hits you.
Yeah.
There's no irony in that sense. There's no sneering at the ideas being presented in a way that I feel like if you make a film now, it's always couched in layers of irony about, yeah, we're all really enjoying this, but oh my God, weren't people really dumb for thinking this back then? And that's where Eggers gets things right. Mm-hmm. I think Boorman sincerely is putting everything on screen that he wants to put on screen, even when those things are not things that you want to see, like how Arthur is conceived. Like I think we both remember how that goes. We'll talk about it later. But he puts that out there for his own reasons, right? And some of that is, again, coming out of the 60s. And frankly, I think it's perfectly in line with what he made in Zardoz, right? I don't know. I know I'm kind of going on about this, but I really do think it's a monumental film. I think it's a very important film. I think it kind of sets a lot of how people tried to make fantasy after this, right? And also, I don't know. What do you think this had an influence on, say, Peter Jackson? I do.
Yeah, I feel like Lord of the Rings and this are kind of the only really ambitious fantasy films.
Yes.
Like, I feel like everything else they try to, like, well, let's do it in bite-sized thing. Like, both those, like, both Lord of the Rings and this really try to...
be epic?
Yeah, they try to be epic, but they take tons of, I mean, like, you know, the Lord of the Rings books, like, they shouldn't be filmable, and they somehow made it. And, like, the thing about this King Arthur movie, it throws so much in.
Yeah.
That, like, other movies, like, maybe, like, you know, they put 3 stories or something, like, this tries to take it all in.
Yeah. Yeah,
And,
normally you make a film about King Arthur and, yes, you just focus on Guinevere and Lancelot, or you just, you know, like in Knights of the Round Table.
Yeah, or Mordred.
Or you focus on Mordred in Camelot, right?
Yeah.
Or, well, I mean, not Camelot is sort of its own beast, but think about, again, like the Green Knight, or versions of Sir Gawain and Green Knight, where they're just taking this one romance.
That's 1 year.
Yeah, exactly. You know, so many attempts at Arthurian stories are just taking little bite sizes. This tries to take in the entire story.
It's the whole lifetime of Arthur.
It is, from conception to death.
Yeah.
This is such an ambitious film. I realized that to some extent I created this, you know, little side podcast in part to talk about this movie. Basically this and like Monty Python and the Holy Grail. Merry Christmas, everybody. Or Happy Holidays. Happy New Year. This is sort of a treat for us.
So we recently watched Caligula.
Oh yeah. If you go back, go re-listen to our episode on Caligula.
But like, I feel like there's probably going to be parallels between that and this.
Yes.
You know, like it's just in its craziness and its Helen Mirren-ness.
Yeah, well, that's true.
And
you know what? I think that they're both films that are maximalist.
Yeah.
Okay. The acting is in some ways very over the top. Certainly the sets are the violence is over the top. Yes, they're not dissimilar films. They're close in time period in which they're made. I don't think they have any overlapping actors other than Helen Mirren. Not that I can remember.
Right.
But they're not dissimilar.
But I feel like there was a general sense at the end of the 70s of like trying to do the blockbuster but high-minded film.
They wanted to make a blockbuster for adults.
Yeah.
Like, they wanted to take Star Wars, right? But, like, okay, we're not doing Star Wars, which is for children. Yeah. We're doing it for grown-ups. Now, I know you're laughing because, King Arthur for grown-ups. And I'm like, look, man, that was true for, like, several hundred years. Many hundreds of years until the 20th century. And then all of a sudden, anything that wasn't, like, my dad in the war became for children.
Yeah.
And, you know, and look, yeah, I know you can't just, like, I don't know. Don't even get me started on, like, my problems with, you know, like, there's a lot of good things about post-war culture that I really agree with, but there's a certain sneering at anything that isn't suburban realism that I find really limiting in our ways of dealing with things, and it sneers at anything. I mean, it's kind of why I kind of roll my eyes when people do take Lord of the Rings lightly, you know. But that's a whole other, you know, we can talk about that later.
Yeah.
Because of course a lot of these things are not about being heroic, and it's not about, you know. Anyway, tangent. Sorry.
Are there dogs in this?
I don't remember.
There must be a dog.
I mean, Arthur had a dog,
yeah,
but I don't remember if there's dogs in this. Is there a love triangle?
There might be.
I mean, come on! Is there a death? Man!
Yeah, there's a few.
Are you asking? Come on, man. This is Excalibur. The only thing I don't know is if there's a dog.
I know. I really don't remember.
I don't remember.
I don't know. I know there's a bird. There's birds.
Yeah.
It freaked me out when I was a kid.
You should be freaked out.
I saw this on Prism. I watched it a lot. Everybody loved this movie.
Yeah.
Like, it was just, you know, it was bonkers, crazy.
Oh, we should talk about that when we come back, like, what it was. Because I saw this in college.
Yeah.
This, which is, like, almost 20 years after it came out. You know, this isn't like, you know, 13-year-olds discovering it on Prism in the early 80s.
Is that how sex works?
No! No, it is not! I mean, sometimes, but that's a bad thing.
So I'm seeing this the same time I'm seeing heavy metal. is what I'm saying.
God, the 80s were amazing.
I know.
Like, that rules. I'm sorry. Things have been kind of boring in the last 10 years. When I think about what the early 80s looked like, look, was it healthy? Did it, help get Ronald Reagan elected? Probably. And everything bad happened since? Sure. But let me tell you something, man. When you're living as a kid and you see, Excalibur, heavy metal, Conan the Barbarian.
Yeah.
God, that rules.
It is.
That's
pretty awesome.
It's pretty awesome. And I'm kind of envious because I didn't have that. When I was a kid.
Maybe there'll be something like that in our next 4 years.
Oh, yeah, but those kids are all going to turn into fascists. It's going to be really depressing.
I'm just saying that maybe entertainment will turn out something like that. I don't know.
It's going to be bad.
RRR.
It's going to be real bad. Should we watch something that's real good?
Yeah.
All right.